So quickly, Newton works, he assumes absolute space and rest mass. If you assume absolute motion, Newton all still works, but you've got this new assumption here of absolute motion. Absolute motion was reviewed by Euler and his work on cavitation of fluids, creating bubbles inside fluids, and his rigid body axis theorem. So if you take one of those bubbles that occurs from cavitation and you displace it just slightly on the outside, Euler proves there is a rotation at the centre. One single rotation must occur somewhere in the system, and it must occur at the centre of the oxygen bubble, because that's what his cavitation assumed. Lewe proves this absolute motion using matrix calculus. So he hasn't used it through experimentation. It's proved mathematically. Absolute motion. And then, so now you have absolute motion proven in Lewe, you take that into quantum and you just rearrange the entire perspective. Photons can't be in two places at once, so you remove the Copenhagen interpretation and you remove uncertainty, and you start saying, okay, well, we're certain about absolute motion, Lewe's proven it, let's look at what we can learn. And this, I think, is important to think about. If you were a physicist, a really, really brilliant person, and you had done your doctorate under the best professor working at the time, and his name was Alexander von Brill, and your name was Victor Lewe, Alexander von Brill is aware of all the experimentation that's been taking place about the search for absolute motion, because they caused an atomic explosion in the 1800s through their experimentation, and it corruptly caused a sleep and a time shift, but they had the memory. So when they woke in a world that they recognised because they'd caused it, so they were right on top of their game. So at that point they thought, well, we don't want to cause any more of these nuclear explosions, we want to control them. We need to find a way of finding a mathematics that gets them under control. And this is much more to do with engineering now than with physics, because it's a real thing, there's real things happening, we need this built and understood from an engineering perspective. So Lewe goes off on his 1906, goes off on a career in engineering as a consulting engineer, strength of materials, working with Hans Reissner on aeroplanes, and the corrugations of the Junkers, that's Lewe's ideas. The shape of that corrugation will be Lewe. So he's proving that it's the shape of a wave. He's replicating a wave that has the strength because it has this absolute motion at the core of it. In his work on shapes, he realizes he can solve the control problem through making an assumption that into a cylinder. So instead of a sphere, and using these incredible eight equations, which are incredibly hard to use and manipulate in the real world, he just assumes a cylinder and creates two equations and drops in coefficients, and it's the coefficients table. So he's given science the coefficient table, and he's given it to engineering as well in 1915. Heisenberg nearly failed his doctorate. He was going to be failed. He was persuaded to pass Heisenberg. Heisenberg is coefficients. Heisenberg was set a task when he was a student to solve turbulence. The professor thought he wouldn't solve it. It was to make him go away, smart ass. And my goodness, he did it. How did he do it? Coefficient table. Winkler's numbers, yeah? Herr Winkler, and the Winkler numbers. He used that idea to analyse turbulence, and he came up with this, yes, I can analyse it. I can tell you its momentum or where it is. So I can look at any point within motion and I can tell you it'll have this momentum or it'll have this position. I can't tell you both, but I've half solved it. Professor incredibly impressed. Heisenberg goes off on his career. That's all he's got in his tank. That's it. That's all he's got. Someone else's ideas. But nonetheless, he's given his doctorate and he attains a position of influence because he's so corrupt and such a smarm. Okay? He's a charmer. Narcissist. Narcissist. So he and Lewe meet. They are now contemporaries. Lewe's name never appears anywhere after 1915, because where he is. But Göttingen 27, Lewe has the links there. He just sits in Berlin as a professor from 1920 for 17 years. And can you give me a student, please, who served the doctorate under Dr. Victor Lewe in that 17-year period? I can't find one. So, what was he doing? Well, he was working on the atomic fission. Heisenberg's trick and Lewe's skill and experimental data are now joined together, and Heisenberg has it too. Heisenberg says, oh, I was right! I knew I was right! It's me, I'm right! I knew I was right. Yeah, narcissistically. And he is. Sort of. So, fission has been decided in 1927. Look at all those lovely smart people in Göttingen 27. And then let's go to 44, where Heim appears. Now, Heim is working on clean hydrogen energy, fusion. The decision has already been taken to do fission, but nonetheless, they're fascinated by someone who seems to be smart enough to work it out. They don't give him Lewe. Otherwise, he would have done it. So you've taken all of your physicists and you've placed it in the hands of Burkhard Heim, who blew them off in his desire to find the truth for clean energy and anti-gravity propulsion. He's going to give it to us. And you said no. The voice of Heisenberg still speaks to us now. Right, that's the only voice I hear. When I hear a physicist talking, I hear Heisenberg, the man who should have failed his doctorate. A crime. A crime. Dr. Death, I see you now. So physics, this is you. This is your world, it's your history. Everything about you. Yeah, it's physics. You placed this document into engineering, and in 42 you broke the link. So now you treat us engineers as just peasants, and we are. Because we're not seeing, we can't see it. We can't see the truth. You've hidden it from us. And nobody has yet been smart enough to work it out. And I'm not. I just found Lewe, and I put him back on your table. And I say, please, physics, please, look at the information. It all works, and the world is ours. Welcome to New Earth.